Hi everyone, and welcome back to Health Kick with Dr. K. Thank you for joining us, and we've got my co-host today is Pastor T from the Wien Community Center. And today's topic is sexual health and libido. So she's a little nervous to be talking about that, but it's a good topic, right? Everyone has questions, everyone wants to know, and I was saying before we started that if one person has a question, there's so many others that have the same, and they just either don't have the resources to find out the answer, or you're just like polling friends, and you know, that sometimes goes sideways. So there are so many directions that this could go. But I want to put it to you, and you know, you were kind of on the spot here today as far as coming into this and finding out that this is the topic we're talking about. So I just want to throw it to you and ask, you know, what questions come to mind for you when you're
Well, the
thinking of this
first
topic?
thing that comes to mind is the topic, what is the libido?
Okay, so libido is kind of the one word for, some people use it interchangeably with sex drive, with sexual interest, so just your interest in sex, and maybe not even just interest in sex, but interest in actually having sex as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the other thing that, as we're on this topic, and I wanted to really, as I was, you know, told that I was going to be doing this, is it a misconception, or is this a reality when they talk about the African American, the black males, libido? And so I did a little bit of research, and I found that there's a report from the African American African American, I want to get the right words here, but this thing on my computer is not working. African American study that shows that through the ideology of the male and the racial groups, that there is an attitude that identifies with a particular racial group, that they are, or their enhancement or behavior towards sex is better or different than their counterparts. So do you think that it is, now that there's an idea or a myth that the black male sex drive is 12% higher, as it says here, than their counterparts, then all of a sudden it sets into the black male's ego that they have to perform a certain way because it's expected of them? And then this creates a kind of sense of an ego that it says within the black male, and then it attracts women to their demographic because of this myth that's going on, that the black males has this over sense of a sex drive than their counterparts. And now their counterparts don't have to try so hard, but when they do, guess what happens? Wow, everybody's surprised, because it's always the black male that has this over sense of a drive. And so what my question is, do you believe that this is creates a behavior within?
That's a real good question. Well, number one, that's a lot of pressure, right? Because I think that testosterone is great, don't get me wrong. As a hormone itself, even, you know, when women, you know, we have testosterone as well, which I think is, you know, not that well known, but women produce testosterone as well. And it's not the testosterone per se, it's what you do with it, right? So yes, testosterone is, like, it really does have a strong influence on sexual behavior as far as thinking about sex, wanting sex, and that type of thing. But nowhere does that correlate with sex drive and performance. Those are different things. So great, they may have more interest, but that doesn't speak to anyone's performance as far as, you know, do they know what they're doing, or is it, you know, is it their first time? You know, these are all things about, like, knowing your partner and what they enjoy specifically, and things like that. So I think testosterone itself, okay, fair enough. And that goes back to, okay, well, where did that come from? Is it because that's how you get the big muscles? That's how you know,
that's what the article talks about.
Yeah,
Yes.
right? So that goes back to like slave times.
That's exactly what the article talks about. Yes.
But, so yes, they will have, you know, the muscle mass to back that up and all that type of thing. But that does not necessarily correlate with performance.
And that's what they talk about in the article. So we need to be very careful because one has nothing to do with the other. And then you do put a pressure on these male species to perform in a certain way.
Right.
And not necessarily be able to deliver because one has nothing to do with the other.
That's right.
And so this is great for us to understand and have those conversations because now the pressure is on all male species
Yeah.
to deliver. And so it's not just on one group, ethnicity group.
That's right.
Because as the article points out, as you so well said it, it's going back to slavery days and when they had, black males had the more muscle mass, their endurance, all of that. And so it created this sense of they can do and perform better in all of these different areas. And it's not necessarily true because it's an individual
That's
basis. It's not about body mass, but it's more about how they are and if they understand what they're doing. And that's why it's very important for us to understand our partners as well. So I thank you for that. So another question that I have here is, what can someone do to boost or increase their sex drive?
So that question I do get often.
Okay.
And
it's not for me, I'm just asking.
asking for a friend, eh, Pastor?
Asking for a friend.
Yes. So this is women, men, or if you don't identify as a gender, it doesn't matter.
Right.
This comes down to the same thing for all of us, which is good sleep, which we've talked ad nauseum about good sleep. Eating whole foods, so making sure that you're getting all of your nutrients, vitamins, minerals from your food. That you're getting sunlight, so vitamin D and being out in the sun and nature.
That's why a lot of the Caribbeans have a very high sex drive.
I mean,
we're going to talk about that later.
Maybe. So those are kind of like just the basics, right?
Yes.
And then you have kind of more so the mental side, which is your self-confidence, your trust in yourself as far as knowing your body, as far as trust in your partner. Those are all things that play into that as well.
You mentioned that before, like in knowing your partner and all of that. So that's very important for a healthy sex drive as well.
Yeah.
And a healthy relationship. I like that. I think we have to really give more importance about our partners and knowing what, and you said this as well, knowing what they like, their needs. What is it that they like? Because I think a lot of times is we focus on what we want and not really what our partner needs, so then we can be able to meet them and give them that sexual desire that they need, right? Because having sex is healthy and it's supposed to be a natural thing.
Yes.
Right? I think today in society we put too much pressure on that form and not really understanding that it is supposed to be a natural thing that was created by God for us to enjoy each other. And so when we put all of these other added variables in that, it takes away from that natural feeling that we're supposed to have from our serotonins and all of that. And then all of a sudden our dopamines and our serotonins that are supposed to be natural cells happy.
Yeah.
Right? We're supposed to
Yeah,
be happy from that. It becomes a stress. Right?
Yeah,
and you get your atypical people that don't enjoy sex as they should because they're atypical. And so we get those different types of buckets within that. And so this is leading me to another question that I wanted to ask you. So we were speaking about eating healthy, eating right foods, making sure you get the proper nutrients from your foods to boost your sex drive. Is that why a lot of people in their 20s go for people in their 40s? Like, I noticed that a lot.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, so they're in their 20s, they're eating the right foods, then the women in their 40s are going through the same kind of thing, make sure they're eating the right foods, and they seem to have an attraction So this is what I wanted to find out, right? You know, they're 25, 26, 27, and they're always attracted to the women in their 40s or the men in the 40s. So I'm always trying to figure out, what is that?
Well,
the sexual drive, like, is it the women are in the sexual drive or peak, or the men are in their 40s at that peak, and they're in their 20s, they're at that peak, and something just drives them there? Like, I don't understand.
Well, from what I hear from clinical practice, and you know, that's kind of my sample, is that women in their 40s and older are going for younger males because they've finally figured out what they like. And either, you know, life circumstance, maybe their partner has passed away, maybe, you know, they're divorced, whatever the case may be, but they have finally taken the time to figure out what they like, and then now they have a partner who is willing to deliver that. And then from the female side of things, they tend to go for the older male because they have more experience and are more generous, let's say.
This is quite interesting. I was wondering about that, so I didn't know. Okay, can I ask another question?
Yeah, by all means.
All right, so now we're talking about the libido and the sex drive and all of this. So this blue pill, green pill?
Viagra.
Right?
Yes.
What color is it? Blue?
Sildenafil, I think it's called. It's blue,
Blue, right. So what I've noticed is that when these men are erected or having their erection, it is so strong. And when they're naturally having it, their penis is not as strong as it is when they're taking this pill. And so it always makes me wonder if, because it is an enhancement and it's enhancing them to be able to perform, and it's not a natural enhancement, is that not hurting them in the back end? Like, I don't know.
So let me just say, from a safety perspective, never take Viagra unless it's been prescribed to you, ever. Because what it does is it opens up the blood vessels, and that's how the erection happens. So there's a chemical reaction that happens, your blood vessels dilate, the blood flow goes there because it's the smallest vessels, and that's what makes the erection so strong. However, if you take that and it's not prescribed for you, your blood pressure can actually drop out and you can pass out, you can faint.
This is not something to play with.
So no, it's not like just a benign thing, like, whatever that you just take. So it does have to be prescribed by a doctor specifically for you at the right dose and all that. But you're right. So it is an artificial erection, and the reason is because all the blood vessels in the penis are dilated and the blood flow is there. And then over the course of just, a sexual interaction, there may not be that strength of erection because different things are going on. The person is thinking about something else or, whatever the case may be, right? And that's normal, that's natural. Erections don't have to be 100% all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So can they get, because you said it's opening up the blood vessels, can they get a blood clot from that?
So,
like, what are the
concern with a blood clot would be more so like something has blocked the vessel, right? So with it being dilated, that would be less of a concern because it would be, in theory, that it's opened really wide, so therefore whatever's blocking it could freely pass through.
Okay.
In theory.
I always worry about that because, even when you watch some shows, it's like hours and hours before it goes back to normal, and I'm just like, is that okay? Right?
So I forget what exactly the rule is, if it's 3 or 4 hours. If it hasn't gone away in that time, you should go to the ER.
Now, do they have that for women?
Viagra pills?
Yes.
Somebody was saying that they've experimented taking it.
I don't mean experiment, I mean just legally. Yes. Go ahead.
It does happen though.
Oh, yes.
And so what happens is it will still dilate the tissue, like it still has the same chemical reaction. So instead it's more of a clitoral reaction. So it'll dilate the clitoris. But that, it doesn't equate to sexual interest or desire or anything.
Yeah. And then my whole thing is, that it's supposed to be something natural. I guess they do this because are they feeling anything, the men, when they take this? Because really?
Yeah, you can still, there's still, all the sensation is still there.
Okay.
For sure.
I always wondered about that, so I just wanted to ask that question as we're on this topic, right?
Yeah.
And so another question that I wanted to ask, you'll always hear couples always talking about how many times, they have sex and all of that. And so one of the questions that always come up, what is a normal sex drive?
Honestly, I recommend everyone read this book called Come As You Are, and it's by Emily Nagoski. I think that's how you say her last name. But Come As You Are, and Emily Nagoski, I believe. Okay. And it's just such a good book on explaining sex drive, and basically there's an example in the book about saying how some people have a gas and a brake. And if some people's gas and brake are more sensitive than others. And so, for example, if you have somebody that their brake is like, the kids are driving them crazy, work is super busy, they haven't slept, their brake is like fully on. And so the way to get them interested in sex is not to push on the gas, it's actually to remove items from their brake, so that they can then actually get back into, okay, there are some things I'm interested in, and
So so there's no way that say that there's a normal sex drive. Everyone's is different then.
Yeah.
And then we go back to what you said earlier. You need to know your partner.
Yeah.
So it's very important for us to know that person that we're going to in bed, that we're taking to our in bed. It's these one night stands. Isn't cutting it. We need to really get to know the individual before we take them to bed, because it's a whole entire relationship and there's a process behind it.
Of course.
And so, you want to understand one another, you got to take the time to understand, see what works, what doesn't work. So it's okay to tell your partner, I don't like that. Can you try something else?
Of course.
And it shouldn't hit anybody's ego. But if you're already told that you're supposed to have a high ego, a high sense of, and you're supposed to command the bedroom, then when somebody's telling you something, because there's an ideology there that this ethnicity group, you guys are supposed to know what you're doing, and you're supposed to have control over it. So when your partner tells you, hey, I don't like it this way, it can hurt the ego.
Yeah,
right?
And I think anyone could potentially have their feelings hurt by that, but it's the delivery, right?
Yes.
And also the intention behind it is just to maintain that connection and to keep a flow going.
So let me ask a question, because that happens a lot into marriages, relationships, where as you grow, your sexual desire changes. And having that conversation seems to be something that we don't do well. And it will be during frustration, it comes up. So how would you tell us, those that are listening and in that boat, to say, okay, you know what, I don't like that anymore, right? I'm 29, 30, I've been with you for 8 years, we're married and all that, but I don't like that anymore. So this is what I prefer. How do we do that without, as you say, hurting the one that we love? Because then it comes into a big argument.
Right.
And what you didn't want it to become an argument, it becomes an argument. Right?
Yeah. Honestly, that one is tough to navigate because everyone's a bit different. I would say, if you're trying to preface the conversation of be like, hey, like I really want to talk to you about our sexual relationship. I want you to feel safe, secure, and heard in that conversation. This is what I'm feeling. This is where I'm at right now. And this is, to do with what you want or you don't want, right? Like at times, sometimes it just life is overwhelming and you are not interested in sex, and your partner feels, they feel upset by that because they're like, oh, you don't want me anymore. I'm not interesting anymore. And then you just say like, hey, no, listen, I am just overwhelmed right now. This has nothing to do with you. Just again, every relationship is different of how open that line of communication is, but trying to broach it as delicately as possible and just have both parties feel heard. And
I think what we have to do as society is have these conversations when we're going into these relationships or in these relationships. You know, take time out and have these much needed conversations, because we know that sex is a very important part of the relationship, and it's not supposed to be a part that causes unhappiness.
Definitely.
Right? It's supposed to be a part where you can come together and you're expressing each other's love to one another. And so I think we need to also do that. But once again, it's about the libido, right? And so, I think I got all of my questions. Yes, I did. There you go.
So just coming back into what you were saying as far as, you know, having the conversation, right? I think having the conversation early on is so important, because sexual compatibility is huge, you know, and I've definitely had people that have been in long-term relationships, you know, they're 3 years in, they're 5 years in, and they're just like, listen, like this is a big deal. This is not sexually satisfying for whatever reason, again. But the relationship breaks down because whatever the differences are, they're not able to reconcile those differences. So I definitely feel like having those conversations early on in a relationship, as awkward as it may seem, is very important. Because if you have two totally different styles of expressing love or sex or any of those, you know, anything in that realm, basically, there's going to be problems. And if you're not willing to either compromise or, you know, do something for one person and have them do something different for you, or however it works out.
You just got me one more question before we go. What's the difference between sex and love? You said it.
So this question I'm not supposed to answer in 1 minute.
Part two, as
that will
producer
probably
always say. Part two.
Yeah, right. Honestly, that's hard, because a lot of times they're very interlaced, and you know, and it honestly doesn't even matter how old you are. You could be 15 and having your first sexual experience. You could be 70 and, you know, with a new partner, for example.
Is it the speed? I always think that when you're having sex, it's for speed and you're trying to fulfill a need right then and there. But when you're making love, is an expression of how you guys are, and the time, there's no time on it. And you make the extra effort to make sure that you guys both needs are being met. Yeah, so that's what I always say to people. I say sex is rushed, because you got a need that you want to fill, and it has to get done, and then you go about your business. But to make love, now you put more effort in it, honey, and they get the rose petals. You do all of that, and you take the time, right?
Yes.
I'm just saying. I don't know.
Pastor T is telling us about the rose petals. Very good. All right.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, that's a good explanation. I'm sure there's 1,000 different ones, but the main thing to take away from today is, you know, we chatted a lot about libido and what that means, and having honest, open conversations with your partners, right?
Yes.
I honestly feel like I could have talked way longer about this topic. Maybe I can.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about it again. There's some more things I'd like us to really hit on. Yes.
Like, for example, what I would talk about is the prevalence of sexually transmitted infection in London, because we're in London and that's relevant. And, you know, what are some signs and symptoms to look out for? And I will give you one hint, is that a lot of STIs don't have any signs or symptoms. So if somebody just tells you, oh, I'm clean, no, that's not a thing, okay? So talking about that, talking about where you can get testing, a little bit more detail, London Middlesex Health Unit does free testing for anyone for all of the major STIs. Then we can talk about, you know, conditions that affect sexual function. We can talk about, we didn't talk about aphrodisiacs. Those have a lot of things around them. Aphrodisiac is like a food or an item that is like sexy.
Yes.
So we didn't talk about that.
They do that.
Yes. There you go.
Yes.
So all the reasons why those are considered aphrodisiacs, but there is actually a reason behind it. It's not just like some random thing that people thought up. And then talk about fertility, because that too is very important. And Anywho, as I say, we could talk at length about this, and we have our topics for next day. Next day is going to be all about stretching, which also is very important for, you know, muscle recovery and all that good stuff.
Yes.
So join us the end of next month, so that'll be May. May 27th, we're gonna be talking about stretching and all the different types of stretching, when to do it, how long to do it, all of that good stuff. And so thank you so much, Pastor T, for joining us today, asking all the great questions. And for any of you that have listened live or watching the recording, thank you so much. And we'll catch you next month on Health Kick with Dr. K.